The scientific method is critical to perform and deduce strong conclusions for any questionable test. So just how has the scientific method evolved, and how has it impacted a societal understanding of things we know, and why it's important to keep doing what we're doing? We start back in 384 BC with the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who created a version of the scientific method that follows this. Study what others have written about the subject, look for the general consensus about the subject, and then perform a systematic study of everything even partially related to the topic. So let's use this way of thinking for our own problem. So what was the number when drawn? We already have the knowledge of integers and thus observe the symbol, which is a 6, by seeing it. And we know it's correct, but let's study other relevant areas such as turning the paper around. Now we see a 9, which is also correct, so we conclude that 6 and 9 are true, but only 1 is correct to the true understanding of this subject. So we deduce that by studying the position of the paper had a greater impact on the understanding of it. Now as we jump forward a fair few centuries, we will find ourselves here in how we look at, ironically, the scientific method. The scientific method now has a fairly straightforward approach to the way we question things. This is as follows. Make an observation, ask a question, form a hypothesis or testable explanation, test that prediction, and iterate using the results to make new hypotheses and/or predictions. But this method becomes very specific with every subject. By using this method can we deduce a greater understanding of the subject at hand. Going off from what we found using Aristotle's scientific method, we can now make a hypothesis and say that by seeing the symbol can we deduce its value. Thus, make a prediction being the number we will see is a 6, and by testing it, we observe that it's a 6. Then iterate the method and form another hypothesis being, the position of the paper has an effect on the result we see. Thus, by going through that method again, we will find that we notice a 9 by turning the paper, which conflicts with our initial findings, so to conclude that a 6 or 9 was drawn. From here we go and make new hypotheses or predictions to continue to test and produce results until we can come to a stable amount of reliable data that can conclude and support the hypotheses. For a better understanding, we must also account for any uncertainty within our results. This will show us how accurate the results are in order to see how much we can improve on them. This will conclude the best possible understanding for our question. Coming back to the question, what was the number when drawn? We know if we continue to test different hypotheses to find out which position the paper was at the time of origin, we will know if a 6 or 9 was drawn. This way of scientific reasoning and problem solving creates a scientific method now which has evolved to be more reliable in the way of gaining more knowledge easier. Also, by stating everything we know and don't know, affects our understanding as a society to be more united in a more acceptable and complete way of understanding. That will prove that our societal way of thinking scientifically matters extremely more compared to the Greek philosophers with such detail to things was not known when to be used properly, which is why there was so many conflicted arguments for a single subject compared to now. By continuing what we are doing right now, we will reach for better and more efficient ways of testing things. This will achieve greater understandings within every subject we observe and question, and thus become easier to find further knowledge.